Right, in this section of the course, we are going to implement the signup handler. So the signup handler is responsible for getting user credentials and saving user credentials such as email and password on the database. And the user credentials are sent to the server as part of the request object. So the request object has the attribute called body, r.body, and body will have all those attributes. So we need to extract that information out of the body and add it to our value that we are going to create from the user struct. So here, let's get rid of this, and we need to create a variable called user, and user will be of the user struct type. Okay, and now we need to use JSON.newDecoder, and the new decoder will basically decode the request body, and it is basically a new decoder returns a new decoder that reads from R. And then we need to decode this again. The decode is defined for you here. A decode reads an XJSON encoded value from its input and stores it in the value pointed to by V. Okay, so the documentation for Ann Marshall for details about the. Okay, so decode returns an error. It takes an interface. Okay, it doesn't really know what type of value that you are passing into it. So, and then it basically decodes the value and returns an error. So now let's go here and pass our user address into it. Okay, now after you have done this, you want to print out user. Okay, and let's see what happens. Open Postman and make sure it's post sign up and pass this information and rerun our server. Now send, and if you go back to your terminal, you see this. Okay, so in order to be able to print very detailed struct values, I will use go-spew format. Is not going to help me much, and spew can be installed using this command. So copy this. Right, so go-spew is inside GitHub, and when you go down, you find the installation instruction and install spew, and also go into your editor and import spew into your main.go file. Alright, now instead of this, if you do spew.dump and pass user into spew.dump, and I'll show you how these two are different. Okay, so you can see the usefulness of spew. Now clear your terminal and do go run main.go and go back to your postman and send. Now here you see the difference. Here you are only given the value, so it's kind of hard to see or to remember which value belongs to which field, but here you have very detailed information about the value. You have the fields, the field names, and then you have the field types, and you also have the values, right? So we're not passing any ID, so the zero value of an int is 0, and in this case we are passing email and we have the value, we're passing password and we have the value, and even the length of the string. So we'll use spew.dump for our printing purposes from now. Okay, now Go back to your editor. Okay, so here we have seen our decoder has decoded the request body and basically mapped the values to our user value, right? So user variable. So now what we need to do is we don't want to pass empty email values and empty password values to our database. So we want to do some kind of validation here. So if we do if user.email is equal to empty, then respond with error. Okay, and same thing if user.password is empty, respond with error. Okay, now this should be a bad request. This is also a bad request. Okay, now what we need to do in order to accomplish this is, earlier we have created this error struct, right? So error has message. Now here we create a variable called error from our error struct type and save that. And in here what we want to do is error dot message is email is missing, and here our error dot message will be password is missing. Okay, and we want to use a response writer, okay, to show status. So we want to send status, which will be bad request. Okay, so in this case we do the same. So HTTP has if you do HTTP dot status, you have all these types of status properties or attributes, and bad request basically is 400. Okay, the status 400. So we want to send HTTP dot status bad request to our client. Okay, so what we need to do is, again, let's comment this out. We need to invoke on the response writer write header. Okay, into write header we pass HTTP dot status bad request. All right, now if you look at write header accepts only the status code, and it sends an HTTP, basically sends that status code to the client. Okay, now let's go again and let's see what we need to send. So we have our error message, and then we do JSON.new encoder, and into new encoder we pass W, which is a response writer, and we do encode and we pass error. Okay, and now after we've done this, we want to return out of the handler function. So again, for password we do the same, right? We want to send this error message and this status. So since this is kind of repeating, we want to extract this into a function that we are gonna name respond error, and respond with error should accept the response writer, http.response that should accept status int, and should accept. Okay, now we can basically copy this and paste it into the function, and copy this, bring it here, and here what we need to pass is the response writer and http.status bot request, and we also need to pass the error message. Okay, and here we have to replace this by http status bot request by status, and we need to get rid of this. So now we're basically passing the response writer, the error message, okay, and the status code. Again, we'll do the same thing here. Okay, now instead of repeating 2 or 3 lines, you only have one single function calls to respond with error. Now save this and clear and run your server again. And go back to your terminal, and okay, first let's get rid of the email and hit send. And here you're not getting anything on the terminal, but here you're saying you're getting 400 bot requests, right? It says email is missing. All right, now if you have the email and if you don't have the password, and click on send, again you're getting 400, and it's telling you that password is missing. So this is useful because you want your user or your client to understand what's going on if they are sending some data with missing information that's required, right? So they would understand and rectify the problem or the error. So if you don't have both, it will basically say email is missing and return out of the function, because we have this return keyword here. Okay, return statement. Now this is good. Now let's go ahead and implement the rest of our function. So we have not fully completed our signup handler function, but what we have done is we basically accepted the request body, and we recorded the request body, and we basically assigned or added the values of the request body to our user variable that we have created here. And here we basically did some validation for email and password, because we don't want to save empty email and password on our database. And we created a function that responds with an error status code as well as an error message, so the client understands what's going on if they are sending incomplete information to the server. Okay,